You know, I was just adoring his golden hoodie, and then one thing led to another, and then I find myself here presenting. So, greetings from Finland, everyone. The name of the elevator company, it was Kone, by the way, so that you saw in the Einstein Analytics demo. But I'm here to talk to you about flows, and especially the new Flow Builder. And this is going to be an introduction to flows, so I'm not going to go into any too technical detail, but instead I would like to show you some of the use cases, some of the capabilities of flows, and then of course show you the new Flow Builder in action. So I'm going to do a little introduction of myself, because who doesn't like speaking of themselves? And then what are flows? I'm going to give a very brief overview of the different automation tools that we have in Salesforce, and then use cases, Flow Builder, and I have a couple of demos, and a couple of them are actually GDPR related, so it's going to be super boring, but useful. So like Paul said, I've been running the Finnish User Group for about 5 years now, and I've got a bit over 8 years of Salesforce experience. Started out as the admin, working for largest staffing and recruiting company in Finland, and pretty quickly I became the product owner there. So I did that for about 5 years. Then I thought that, you know, I would like to use my knowledge and capabilities in a little bit more varied way, so I went to consulting. And then I did that for a couple of years. I'm still working at the company where I've been, and in 2017 I got certified as a Salesforce certified instructor. So today I'm teaching these admin and advanced admin courses, and when I'm not doing that, I'm the head administrator for Fluido's internal Salesforce org. So if you're struggling with your end users, you have no idea what it's like to have 270 Salesforce consultants and developers as your end users. That's you can't really say that, no, we can't do that, because there's always someone who knows better. So yeah. It says 6 to 9 certifications, because some of the certifications, like the Force.com developer, don't exist anymore. And these instructor certificates, they're not calculated really, but there's like a 4-hour teaching sample that you have to give for each. So yeah, I calculate those. Anyways, that's a very brief introduction about me. And then we're going to move on to the main topic of today, which is flows. And we're talking about the new Flow Builder, but make no mistake, there is nothing new about flows, because flows have actually been around since 2012. But the only thing that we're getting now is a totally revamped user interface, and I can already tell you it is pretty good. And if you haven't been using flows before, it might seem a little bit more technical, because flows actually use these programming concepts, but still you're not writing any code, but you will be working with things like variables or loops. So variables, like I've pointed there, basically they're things that you use to store some information that you're going to be referencing and manipulating in your flows. And these loops, they're basically, you can tell the computer to do something over and over and over again until something happens. So this is a little bit more technical. I'm not going to go there too much. This is still an introduction. But just so you know, don't be afraid, even if these would sound intimidating. It is fairly simple and straightforward once you get into it. So they are a little bit more complex, but with that, they're also a lot more powerful. You can do a lot with flows. And one use case for flows is called call scripting. And what that means is you can show these different kinds of screens to your end users, and depending on the choices that they make on these screens, they might be redirected to a different kind of screen where you're asking certain kinds of questions. And a typical example would be in a customer call center, where you're using this kind of script to troubleshoot what the customer issue is. And then, depending on the customer's answers, you get different kinds of questions. And you can collect all of those questions and then ultimately create a case out of those answers that you have gotten and the customer has provided. So that's using this kind of a standalone flow that your users are looking at. But with flows, you can also have things happening in the background. It's possible for a process builder process, for example, to call for a flow that would then, for example, delete a record. So flows can be either these standalone things, these screens that your users see, or it can work together with some other automation that you have in the system. And with flows, it is possible to make database queries. So you can, if you only have an email address, but you would like to get the contact ID, well, you can do that with a flow, and I actually have that featured as one of my examples that I'm going to show you today. But let's see these different kinds of automation tools that we have in Salesforce. So workflows, the very, very basic but extremely reliable workhorse that allows you to create tasks, send email notifications, make field updates, or these outbound messages without any code. So that's probably something that you're familiar with, and especially Process Builder. It has been all the rave in the recent years, and it takes what workflow can do and it adds so much more to it. So with this Process Builder, you can create any kind of record, not just tasks, and you can also update records, not just the one that started the process, but anything that's related to it. And chatter posts, approvals. Technically, approvals is also one automation that Salesforce has, but I just included it here with the reference from Process Builder, because Process Builder can also trigger this approval process and start that automatically, so your users don't have to manually submit things for approvals. And then, if that's not enough, you can also run custom code. You can run these flows and even other processes with the Process Builder. And it has a nice visual user interface that I think is a lot more appealing to new admins at this point. And Salesforce isn't really developing workflows anymore, so the future seems to be in the Process Builder and everything you can do there. But there are still certain use cases for workflows. Especially if you have something mission critical that you want to have happen on a time-based level, then workflows would be my tool of choice for that, because workflows will work regardless of you deactivate any users or not. That's like my only issue with Process Builder. If you have a time-based process and you deactivate the user who started the process, that process will fail. But workflows, they will actually do the thing no matter what. But flows, on the other hand, they add to this, and especially together with Process Builder, you can do so much more. So flows, first of all, can delete records, and then for these other things using complex branching logic, sorting through, iterating, and all of that, actually I have a couple of example and use cases that represent these three different things. For example, using this complex branching logic. Basically, if you're thinking of Process Builder, you can have logic, you can have different kind of criteria. If this is true, then we're going to do these actions. If not, you're going to evaluate the next one. If that's true, you can do certain other actions, and so forth. But there's only one level of logic there. Something is true or false, and then you check the next thing. And by that time, the thing that you previously checked doesn't really matter anymore, because Process Builder just runs through these simple criteria and does whatever it finds a matching criteria for, and that's it. But with flows, you can actually add multiple layers of this kind of branching logic. So first of all, we could check if a case is escalated. Then, if the case is escalated, the next criteria could be, well, what is the account's region? And if it's EMEA, then we can actually take that EMEA information from the account and assign a new owner based on that. So it's going to go to the EMEA sales team queue. With the process builder, we couldn't do this because we could just check if the case is escalated, then we do something, or if the account regions that we just assign it there. So very simplified example. These flows, they can get really complex really quickly, but I'm trying to keep these examples as simple as possible. And then sorting through, iterating over, and operating on several records. So this kind of what I was talking about with the looping function. So you could do, for example, take an opportunity, and if it's closed won, you just check this discount amount that you have on the opportunity, and then with that information you could go through all of the opportunity products that you've added under that opportunity and use that discount percentage and update the opportunity product rows with the discounted price. So your opportunity product rows will actually match that. And that would be going through all of the product rows. Doesn't matter if there's 1 or 17, it will go through each and every one of those and do the same thing over and over and over for those. And then the last example here, navigating these users through different screens. So these two generally would happen in the background, and with these screens you can basically guide your users and do this kind of path for them that, you know, depending on certain answers, you get different kind of things. And you can use this for your internal users, or you can publish this in your community. So there's a lot of different use cases for this. So all of this happens with the new flow builder that we have pictured here on the right-hand side. And if you've been using the old flow builder, you can see that this looks so much clearer and nicer. And I personally, I'm a big fan of this new user interface. But basically, it is ultimately, underneath the bonnet, it is the same flows that you have been using before. And because of that, it will also support all of your existing flows. The only limitation is if you edit something in the new flow builder, you won't be able to go and edit it in the old Cloud Flow Designer anymore. But the basic thing is you will be able to utilize everything that you have built so far, and you will get this new user interface on top of that. And no more Flash. That is the ultimate goal here. So in 2012, it was still kind of a relevant technology, but it's 2019 now, so it's all about Lightning Web Components nowadays. And yeah. Some other things that you can do with the new flow builder. You can have these flow templates, so you don't necessarily have to start from scratch anymore. Instead, you can have this template that you can start with and start to modify, and that should make it even easier for even more people to start using flows and creating some sophisticated business automation with that. And flow solutions, that's also something that is now available in the App Exchange. So you can install these ready-made integrations and you use those as part of your flows. So, for example, if you have a Get Feedback survey that you would like to put into your community, well, you can just install this flow solution and build your flows, and then just basically drag that in there and specify which survey you want to show, and that will be integrated right in there into your flows. So,
can I ask you a question on all of the introduction of new products? Salesforce pushes the trailhead the whole time.
Yeah.
When they're bringing this out, are they also going to have a large amount of projects specifically with new flow builder as part of it?
Well, I don't have any insider information about that, but that is what usually happens. Yeah. So yeah, if there's someone who can answer that, I would be thrilled to hear the answer. But presumably there will be, because Salesforce has been investing a lot in Trailhead lately. So.
Yeah, no, the reason behind it is that you want to show it to an end user as well that this is brilliant. But if there isn't like a Trailhead or there's something which is made for them, then they're going to wait for 6 months before they'll say, oh yes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, fair enough. And like with, if you've been working with Salesforce for longer, yeah.
But yes, the existing trailer should be upgraded soon.
It'll be upgraded. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the pipe.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Yeah.
There is already an online tutorial available on how to use new flow.
Yeah.
You can find all the information already.
Yeah, and I have a couple of resource links on the last slide, and I'm going to work with Paul to have them uploaded to your community group, so we can you can see some resources there as well. But yeah, if you've been working with Salesforce for longer, you might know that occasionally some new Salesforce products aren't really that super complete when they're brought up.
6 releases.
Yeah, but I have to say, much like with the new report builder in Lightning, it was surprisingly complete when it actually was released, and I have a similar feeling on this. Sure, there are certain things that are still missing, but it's surprisingly complete and functional already as it is. So, in my opinion, you can start using it. There's nothing preventing you from that because the team has done a good job on that. And I'm not saying that just because we have some team members here from there. But hey, enough theory. Let's see this in action. First, I'm going to show you a very, very simple use case with a tip calculator. It's a very American example as well, because tipping is all the rage in there. So I'm going to show you how this tip calculator works, and then I'm going to show you how it was built, and then I'm going to take it a little bit more complex with some database queries and saving a new case as well. So I'm going to also show a demo of how to create new cases with flows. But with that said, let's have a look on what this tip calculator can do. So on the top right hand side here, I have this on my home page. This is a flow component. So if you go to the page editor, you can just drag these flows in here. And this tip calculator, it works like this. You type in your bill amount. It was 320 euros, and the service was actually excellent. And then, once you click on next, the system will show you that your bill total was 320, you should tip 64 euros, and the total amount you should pay is 384 euros. Yeah, so it's a very American example, but that's how it works. It calculated a 20% tip, and if I would want to do this again, just refresh the page, let's see. So if I do this again and the service was just okay, then it's the American way, then it's only 10%. So
What's wrong with America?
I don't know, but that's just how things work there apparently. But throughout this entire thing, nothing was actually done in the database. All of this was just calculated within this flow. And next up, I'm going to show you how I actually built this. So this is the new flow builder. And good news, everyone, if you've been using the old one, you don't need to start these anymore. You have that already built in there. So they've really made it a lot simpler to get started with. But the things that we have here, I have two screens in here. First, I have this bill information screen that asks the users two things. It asks how much the bill amount was. That's a currency field. And then I have a couple of these radio buttons here that indicate what level the service was. We could also add, for example, display image. That's something that we didn't have in the old flow, and there's a lot of these different kinds of things that Salesforce has introduced, and Safe Harbor will be introducing. So you're going to have a lot more options compared to the old version, and some of that is visible there already. But these radio buttons, how do we convert excellent into 20? Or okay into 10? Well, technically we don't, because all of these different choices are actually choices that we have created into this flow. And I'm going to show you what that means. So Normally, when you start building your flows, you can start adding these different kinds of screens or these different kinds of logical functions in there or database functions. But if you go to this Manager tab here, you can see all of the components that you have already built into this flow. And for example, my choices. If I open up this excellent choice, I can see that the API name is excellent. The choice label, what the users see, it's called excellent. But the actual value that we have here is a number, and that number is 20. Same thing, if I go with this OK choice, number is 10. So there is a number hiding underneath that text. That's the actual value that we get out of this choice. And then, once we have this choice, and we've collected this bill amount on one of our screen components, it's a currency field, we can create a formula that then calculates the tip amount, which is bill amount multiplied with the service quality. So this was the 20 divided by 100 so that we can get this 0.2 multiplier. And then it's going to take the bill amount and multiply it with 0.2, and that's how we get the tip amount. Then, for the total amount, we basically just take the tip amount and we add it to the bill amount. Fairly simple formulas, fairly simple mathematics. And then, after we've gotten this information and we have all of those formulas, then on the last screen, we just show the tip amount. We have this long text area where we have this text, your bill total was bill amount, so you should tip the tip amount. The total amount you should pay is total. So nothing is saved into the database. This is just calculated for your users, and this is one example of how your users can be directed from one screen to another and dynamically calculate these different kinds of values. So very simple example, but I think it's a nice example of things that you can just introduce into your homepage or to your community or basically any kind of Lightning page that you have. But let's make it a little bit more complex, shan't we? So I'm going to show you this other flow that I have created, which is the Troubleshoot Flow. And this is already a little bit more complex. So what we're doing here is, first off, we're showing this customer info screen that only has one text field that asks for the customer email. That's what your users see, customer email. And then, with that email address that we get, we're actually doing in the background a database search, the get contact IDs search. And if I open this up, I can see that basically what this element will do is it's going to get me some records from the contact object, and it's going to take all the contacts where the email equals whatever the user typed into the previous field. So we're going to use that screen input and use that as part of our database query. And basically, we're going to take one record where the email matches the one that was inputted. And then we're going to store two variables. The first variable that we take is the variable account ID. And with the account ID, we're going to use this later on when we're creating the case to automatically match the case into the account. And from this same contact, we're also going to take the contact's ID and we're going to assign that as the variable contact ID. So just based on the email address, we're searching for a contact and picking out the account ID and the contact ID and then we're going to store them in these variables so that we can use them later on when we're creating the case. All of this happens in the background. The user doesn't know what's happening. Instead, the user will see this kind of screen. What's the customer's issue? So, user gives the email address and then types in what's the customer issue, and then we're going to create a case. So we're going to create a case where the account ID is the account ID that we stored in the variable, the contact ID is the contact ID that we stored in the variable, and the subject of the case, well, that's going to be whatever the user wrote into this what's the customer issue field. And with that, we're going to then show the user a screen that says a case has been created for you. And because sometimes when we have these database operations, something can go wrong. If we're missing a mandatory field, for example, we might get an error message. So in this flow, I've also included one other screen. So if there's something that goes wrong, either searching or creating the new case, then we're going to show this system error message, and so that the users would actually see that, hey, you couldn't do this because something. We could also type our own text in here if we'd like. But with this flow, we will be able to create a new case, automatically match it to the contact and the account just by using the customer's email address, and I'm going to show it to you now. So I just clicked run from the flow builder, and please load, yeah? All right. The demo effect, it is a real thing. So for the customer email, I'm going to use Carol at Global Media because that's what the customer told me. And then, okay, what's the customer issue? The shipment didn't arrive even though customer ordered it 3 weeks ago. That's the customer issue. And then, if I go to the next page, a new case has been created. Let's see if that actually happened. This is the exciting part. So, I have my contact here, Carol White, with this email address. And yeah, so Carol at globalmedia.com. And if I look at the cases here, I can see that a new case has been created today. This is still in Finnish time, so that's why it's 9:39. But this case, once I open this, we can see that it has been linked to Carol, the contact, and the Global Media, the account, and the subject line has my typo in there, so you know that it's real. So the shipment didn't arrive even though customer ordered it 3 weeks ago. So simple use cases for flows, but because you could add one screen after another, you could build fairly complex call scripts, and with these database operations and queries and variables or constants if you want to go there, you can build a lot of sophisticated automation without any piece of code. And I think that's pretty impressive. So those are my couple of examples that I wanted to use to introduce this tool to you. But I also have one business case that is very much GDPR related that I would also like to show you. And basically, the business case here would be that there's this company that is getting a lot of new leads through their web-to-lead form. But sometimes their existing customers, they might, fill out the web-to-lead form just to contact the company. Don't ask me why, but that's what they do. And we would need to be able to identify these individuals based on the email address, and if they've opted out of something GDPR related, like don't market or don't contact, then we need to show that to the user immediately. But if there's no information that we have, then of course we don't want to have any user interface elements there. We just want business to be as usual. And no coding allowed. And this is actually something that I have also built, and I'm going to show you how this one works as well. And for that, I'm going to jump into a different Salesforce org. And here, I'm going to show you that I have this contact called John Bond. And John is a longtime customer of ours. And we have his email. And we also know that there's actually a little bit of history there that this particular individual has actually opted out from certain things. But let's look at the business case. So we get a new lead. I'm just going to create a new lead here. There's going to be Peter, tester from Testco. That's too British supermarket. Let's Testco, yeah, not Tesco. And basically, I didn't put any email in here, so we don't have anything to match it with. And it's basically business as usual. This is what we get when we create a new lead that we don't really find any matches for. But if I were to create a new lead, for example, John Bond from Grand Hotels with the email address that we actually have on file. Now, once we save this lead, we actually see that, hey, we have this don't track and don't market values already in the system under that particular individual. So I'm happy to go into more detail about how all of this works, but I think my 40 minutes are almost up. But basically, in the background, it's using a flow. We do have a process builder process that actually launches the flow, and then this is just a normal dynamic lightning component that's only visible if we have a has individual checkbox set to true. So that actually controls whether we see this or not. But without any code, we are able to match those incoming leads into these existing individual records, and if we find a match, we're able to show, just with this normal related list, single related list component, the history for that individual. And that way, our users will know that they should not track and we shouldn't market to this particular individual.
Can I just ask on that, why wasn't there a potential duplicate found? That's what the business guy would say.
Yeah, because I don't have the duplicate prevention enabled in this org.
No, but
yeah.
But it makes, no, it's very good.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's one use case. And before we wrap things up, I'd like to tell you another real-life GDPR example that I've configured. This is using the old flow builder, so if you haven't seen that before, you might understand why I'm so excited about the new user interface. But basically, in our company, we do everything with Salesforce, including our recruitment. So we get these applicants, and once they apply, they agree that we can store their data for 1 year. After that, we don't want to delete those applicants because we still want to have the historical data of how many people have actually applied and how many have we hired and so forth. But due to GDPR, we need to anonymize those applicants after 1 year. And for that, we're using a process builder process. It will basically just take the name and the phone number and the email and just add like abc@abc.com and things like that in there. So we're losing the actual identifiable details of that. But the problem was CVs, they come in as attachments. Our recruiters might write notes that include this person's name, and there might also be some files that are attached. And also, when these applicants apply, they fill in their previous employers, and we have a custom object employer that generates different records for these different past employers. So this process builder, in addition to anonymizing the record itself, it's also gonna run this flow that takes the applicant ID and then searches for attachments. And if it finds some attachments, it's gonna delete all of them. And then it's gonna search for notes. If it doesn't find any, then it's gonna look at the files. If there's any files that have been attached to it, it's gonna delete them. And then it's gonna search for these employer records. And if it finds any, it deletes them. And if it doesn't, then things just end. So with the process builder and a flow, we are able to not just anonymize it, but also delete all of the related records from underneath that particular applicant. And our company should be pretty GDPR compliant through that. So I'll leave you with, oh yeah, this is the thing that we did get. This is totally hashtag safe harbor, because like I said, there are still some things missing, but we got some insider information, and yes, the copy-paste functionalities and undo and redo, those are coming, safe harbor, but we've heard from Salesforce that they will. Much like moving and selecting these multiple elements and rearranging them, those are all coming. So all of the functionalities of the previous Cloud Flow Designer aren't there yet, but Salesforce is working hard to bring all of these features in there. And then there's still apparently going to be new features to these screens. So we have these sliders and images that we can already use, but apparently there's still more coming from that direction, but unfortunately we don't know what exactly it is. But this tool, like everything else in Salesforce, it's going to keep on continuing evolving, and it's going to get new features, and I'm personally very excited about the new user interface and everything that you can do with it. So with that, I'm going to leave these resources, and I'm going to share these slides with Paul, and you can then upload these, and a couple of links, but you can also Google. It's like, it works pretty well as well. But I think that's my 40 minutes, so thank you.